Located northwest of Cusco, Peru, Machu Picchu is a testament to the power and ingenuity of the Inca people. Inca had no written language. No records exist to explain the exact purpose of the site.
In 1911, Hiram Bingham discovered Machu Picchu, which he believed was a lost Inca city frozen in time. But that version of history may have been wrong. Scientists recently scanned beneath the iconic ruins and found something that should not exist: a deliberate, engineered anomaly buried deep underground. Now, researchers are suddenly backing away from their own discovery. Their findings have been downplayed, and their access to the site restricted. And now, an airport is being commissioned directly above the site, because what lies beneath Machu Picchu is something authorities will stop at nothing to hide. The deep maze discovered in 2023. For centuries, archaeologists have walked the ancient paths of Machu Picchu believing they knew what lay beneath their feet. But in 2023, a team of researchers published findings in the journal Science Advances that shattered every assumption about what the Inca actually built on that remote mountain ridge. The research team brought together some of the most respected institutions in the world. Yale University led the project, working alongside several other notable institutions, including the United States National Science Foundation. These were scientists operating at the highest level, using the most advanced tools available. They came to Machu Picchu to answer a simple question: who actually lived here? They wanted to know more about the servants, workers, and retainers whose labor kept the royal estate functioning. To find out, they performed the first genome-wide analysis ever conducted on the individuals buried at Machu Picchu. And what the DNA revealed was only the beginning. As they dug deeper, they realized they were standing on top of something far more complex than anyone had ever imagined. The remains they studied came from individuals buried more than 500 years ago, during the height of the Inca Empire. The bodies had been buried in simple graves tucked into residential and agricultural sectors far from the ceremonial heart of the citadel. For decades, archaeologists assumed these graves contained only local workers from the surrounding valleys. But when the genetic results came back, the researchers found themselves staring at evidence of a diversity that defied easy explanation. The people buried at Machu Picchu had been drawn from across the entire Inca Empire. Their ancestry traced back to the Amazon basin, the coastal deserts of Peru, the high Andes, and possibly even regions as far north as modern-day Ecuador and Colombia. Machu Picchu was not a provincial outpost. It was a crossroads, a gathering place where people from hundreds of miles apart shared their lives and their labor. The Inca were known to have practiced a system called mitmacuna, which involved relocating entire communities to serve the state. But the graves at Machu Picchu suggested something more deliberate and calculated. The individuals buried there had been chosen for their loyalty and skills, as well as their ability to sustain a royal estate hundreds of miles from the capital at Cusco. But here is where the story takes its first strange turn. As the research team mapped the graves and analyzed the DNA, ground-penetrating radar began picking up anomalies beneath the residential sectors. At first, the researchers thought they were seeing natural cracks in the bedrock, but the radar kept showing patterns that looked anything but natural. They discovered straight lines, right angles, consistent depths, chambers connected by passageways, and a labyrinth carved by human hands. Researchers soon realized that they had found the chincanas, a ritual labyrinth built by the Incas throughout their empire. These underground passageways were used for ceremonies, offerings, and connections to the spirit world. But the tunnels beneath Machu Picchu's residential sector extended far beyond what anyone expected. They wove beneath homes and terraces, connecting chambers that showed no entrances from above. This was a pre-planned, massive underground complex, engineered with the same precision the Inca applied to their mountaintop citadel. The researchers found themselves facing an uncomfortable possibility. If the residential sector sat atop a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, what else might be hidden below? But as startling as the 2023 discovery was, it would soon be overshadowed by something far more disturbing. The following year, a different team of scientists arrived with technology that could see through the jungle itself, and what the LiDAR scanners picked up from the air would force archaeologists to confront a truth so shocking and completely unexpected that even now, many refuse to accept it. The LiDAR Drone Survey. By early 2024, a new team of scientists arrived at Machu Picchu carrying equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction film. They brought drones fitted with LiDAR systems, technology that would allow them to see through the dense jungle canopy and map whatever lay hidden beneath. What they discovered over the following months would force archaeologists to completely rethink the size and scope of Machu Picchu. The survey team flew their drones back and forth across the landscape surrounding Machu Picchu for months, covering areas that had been impossible to explore on foot. When the data finished processing and the first 3D images appeared on computer screens, everyone in the room went silent. The jungle had been hiding things, and some of them should not have been there. The LiDAR scans revealed 12 previously unknown structures spread across the mountain ridges surrounding the main citadel. These were not small outbuildings or simple farm sheds, but ceremonial complexes, complete with plazas, platforms, and carefully aligned walls that suggested ritual activities far beyond the boundaries of the royal estate. Someone had been conducting ceremonies out there, hidden in the jungle, far from the temples and shrines that millions of tourists visit today. But the ceremonial complexes were only the beginning. The scans also picked up an elaborate water management system snaking through the terrain. These channels, reservoirs, and underground conduits showed that the Inca understood hydraulics in ways no one had fully appreciated. They had engineered the mountain to capture rainfall and direct it exactly where it needed to go, preventing erosion and ensuring a steady water supply even during dry months. This was sophisticated urban planning designed to sustain a large population in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. And that population, it turned out, was much larger than anyone had estimated. The LiDAR data revealed extensive residential areas stretching across slopes that had always been written off as empty jungle. Terraces and house foundations and agricultural zones emerged from the scan, proof that people had lived and worked far beyond the walls of the citadel itself. Contrary to earlier beliefs, Machu Picchu was not a small retreat for the emperor and his entourage, but a functioning city where thousands of people ate, slept, and raised family. The scans also revealed that the agricultural terraces extended for miles, stacked like vast staircases rising up the mountainside. Each terrace was carefully engineered to prevent erosion and maximize crop yields in thin mountain soil. The Inca had transformed a rugged jungle peak into a food-producing machine, feeding a population that scientists now believe was significantly larger than previous estimates suggested. The placement of their ceremonial complexes also revealed that the Inca were not just building randomly across the landscape. They were aligning their structures with something, perhaps mountains, stars, and the paths of the sun and moon. Yet for all these remarkable discoveries, one anomaly stood out from the scan, a feature that defies everything geologists understand about the mountain's formation: the Intihuatana stone. At the highest point of Machu Picchu, where the mountain meets the sky, a single carved granite pillar has stood watch for more than 500 years. The Inca called it Intihuatana, a name that translates roughly to hitching post of the sun. For generations, visitors have touched its surface and wondered at its purpose. But only now are scientists beginning to understand just how extraordinary this stone truly is. The Intihuatana was carved directly from the bedrock of the mountain, integrated so seamlessly into its surroundings that it appears to grow from the earth itself. Archaeologists long believed it served a ceremonial function, a place where priests performed rituals and made offerings to the gods who controlled the sun's path across the sky. Recent measurements have revealed something far more sophisticated, hidden in the stone's precise angles and orientations. When researchers brought modern GPS equipment and astronomical software to study the Intihuatana, they discovered alignments that should not exist in 15th century construction. During the winter solstice in June, the sun positions itself directly above the stone, casting almost no shadow at all. The pillar becomes a central point around which the entire solar cycle revolves. 6 months later, at the summer solstice, shadows fall along specific carved angles with a precision that suggests the Inca understood celestial mechanics better than anyone ever gave them credit for. The stone functions as a solar calendar, marking the passage of seasons with an accuracy that would impress modern engineers. Farmers working the terraces below could watch its shadows and know exactly when to plant and when to harvest. Priests observing its light could schedule ceremonies at the precise moments when the spiritual and celestial worlds aligned. But here is where the measurements take a strange turn. The scale and precision of the Intihuatana's design appear technologically out of place for what we know about Inca capabilities. The angles required to achieve such accurate solar tracking would have demanded mathematical knowledge and observational records accumulated over generations. The stone had to be positioned not just correctly, but perfectly. A single degree off and the solstice shadows would miss their marks entirely. An understanding of celestial mechanics that rivals contemporary observatories in Europe and Asia. Yet it was built by a civilization that left no records of how they calculated such things. What makes the stone even more remarkable is its survival. When Spanish conquistadors swept through the Andes in the 16th century, they systematically destroyed similar pillars across the Inca Empire, viewing them as pagan idols that had to be erased. Machu Picchu escaped that fate only because the Spanish never found it, hidden as it was by jungle and mountain for 300 years. The Intihuatana stands today as one of the few remaining examples of Inca astronomical architecture, a lone survivor of a scientific tradition that might otherwise have been lost forever. The stone holds one more secret, and it has nothing to do with the sun. Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys have detected something beneath the Intihuatana that no one expected. The bedrock into which the stone is carved shows anomalies consistent with deep fissures and voids extending far below the surface. And those fissures, according to geologists, make the Intihuatana's existence even more inexplicable. Fault lines beneath Machu Picchu. For decades, archaeologists puzzled over one question that never seemed to have a satisfying answer. Why would the Inca build their most sacred city on a narrow ridge between two mountain peaks, a place so exposed that even modern visitors feel dizzy walking its paths? In 2019, geologist Rualdo Menegat and his colleagues published a study that finally explained the mystery, and their answer raised even more disturbing questions about what the Inca actually knew. Menegat's team used satellite imagery, geological mapping, and structural analysis to study the tectonic features beneath Machu Picchu. What they found was almost unbelievable. The citadel sits directly at the intersection of multiple major fault lines running through the Andes Mountains. These are deep geological fractures where tectonic plates press against each other, creating the seismic activity that has shaken Peru for millions of years. Conventional wisdom says you do not build on fault lines because they can shift, slip, and cause destruction. But the Inca did something unexpected. They used the faults to their advantage. The natural cracks in the bedrock broke the stone in useful ways, creating a ready supply of rock that could be cut and shaped without the exhausting work of quarrying solid stone. This means that the blocks the Inca used for their famous tightly fitted walls came directly from the faults beneath their feet. But the faults did more than supply building materials. They also created natural drainage channels running through the mountain. When heavy rains fell on Machu Picchu, water followed these ancient fractures, flowing away from structures and preventing the kind of saturation that leads to landslides and collapse. Then there was the question of earthquake. Machu Picchu sits in one of the most seismically active regions on Earth, yet its walls have stood for more than 600 years. When researchers ran computer simulations modeling how the site would respond to seismic stress, they discovered something strange. The opposing tectonic forces at the intersection point actually cancel each other out, creating a pocket of unusual stability. This explains why Cusco, the Inca capital built less than 50 miles away, but not on the same intersecting faults, suffered repeated earthquake damage over the centuries, while Machu Picchu remained largely intact. The question that haunts researchers now is whether this was mere coincidence or knowledge. Did the Inca simply get lucky when they selected that particular ridge, or did they understand fault mechanics well enough to predict which intersections would provide stability rather than danger? Right now, the evidence says this must have been a deliberate choice, a level of geological understanding that should not have existed in the 15th century. But there is something else beneath Machu Picchu that makes the fault lines even more significant. The mountain contains massive quartz deposits, and quartz has a peculiar property that scientists are only beginning to understand. When placed under mechanical stress, quartz generates electricity through a process called piezoelectricity. Scientists now believe that the same tectonic forces that created the faults that could have destroyed the city might have been doing something else entirely beneath the surface. If the intersecting faults create stress on those quartz deposits, and if that stress generates electrical fields deep within the mountain, then Machu Picchu is not just sitting on stable ground. It is sitting on a natural energy source, a geological battery charged by the movement of the Earth itself. This raises a possibility so strange that most archaeologists refuse to discuss it openly. What if the underground complex discovered in 2023, the labyrinth of tunnels and chambers beneath the residential sectors, was designed to harness that energy? What if the Inca built their most sacred city because of the fault lines? The Peruvian government has recently restricted access to certain areas of Machu Picchu, citing preservation concerns. But some researchers believe there is another reason. They believe the government is trying to hide what lies beneath until they can figure out how to control the narrative. Because if the truth about what predates the Inca ever gets out, it will rewrite human history. Is the Peruvian government hiding this? If the discoveries beneath Machu Picchu are as world-changing as scientists claim, why haven't we heard about them on every news channel? Why aren't archaeologists holding press conferences, governments issuing statements, and documentaries being rushed into production? The silence is deafening, and it points towards something far more complicated than simple academic caution. Peru depends on Machu Picchu. The ancient citadel generates more than $500 million annually for the economy, employing thousands of guides and drivers and hotel workers and restaurant staff who depend on a steady stream of tourists making the pilgrimage to this wonder of the world. Tourists come to photograph llamas and watch sunrises and feel connected to an empire they learned about in school. But a discovery of this magnitude would shatter the narrative completely. If the underground complex was designed to harness natural energy from quartz deposits and fault lines, then Machu Picchu is no longer just an Inca city. It becomes something far more mysterious and far more threatening to the carefully managed brand that drives tourism revenue. The Peruvian government would face an impossible choice. They could acknowledge the find and begin proper excavations, which would require closing large sections of the site for decades, while archaeologists, geologists, and engineers work to understand what lies beneath. Or they could manage the findings quietly, limit access, discourage further research, and frame the discoveries as preliminary and inconclusive. Let the story fade from headlines while maintaining the beautiful, safe, romantic version of Machu Picchu that keeps visitors coming. Which option seems more likely for a government facing economic pressure from every direction? Located about 18 miles from Machu Picchu in the Sacred Valley, is now expected to open in late 2027. This airport has been discussed for decades, debated for years, and stalled repeatedly by environmental concerns and indigenous opposition. Now it is moving forward with surprising speed. The purpose of the airport is straightforward. Currently, visitors fly into Cusco's existing airport, which sits in a valley surrounded by mountains and cannot accommodate larger planes or increased traffic. From Cusco, tourists must take trains or buses or hike the Inca Trail, journeys that can take hours or even days. The new airport would allow visitors to fly directly into the Sacred Valley and reach Machu Picchu in a fraction of the time. Supporters argue this will boost tourism revenue, create jobs, and modernize infrastructure for one of South America's most visited destinations. However, critics see something else entirely. Conservationists warn that building an international airport so close to Machu Picchu risks damaging the fragile ecosystems and water supplies that sustain the Sacred Valley. Indigenous communities also oppose the project, arguing it will disrupt their way of life and desecrate lands their ancestors considered sacred. Machu Picchu currently receives more than 1.5 million visitors annually, far exceeding the limits UNESCO recommends for sustainable preservation. Peru has tried to manage this with timed entry tickets and daily caps, but enforcement has been inconsistent, and visitors continue to pour in. The new airport could double or triple those numbers, intensifying pressure on infrastructure that is already strained beyond its limit. Machu Picchu's water supply cannot support unlimited growth. Its roads cannot handle unlimited traffic. Its waste management systems cannot process unlimited garbage. And yet the airport is moving forward, and the discoveries beneath Machu Picchu are not being discussed in any official capacity. What do you think is hidden beneath Machu Picchu? Outro. Drop your answers in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.